Have you heard the new 11th commandment? Thou shalt not yuck someone else's yum. The Reverend Erica Hewitt, UU.
Fred, you're muted.
I'll start again. I thought I had unmuted. Have you heard about the 11th commandment? Thou shalt not yuck someone else's yum. The Reverend Erica Hewitt, UUA Minister of Worship Arts, puts it this way. I noticed lately that I hold my small, harmless pleasures close, lest an online friend spit into the small hearth fire that I have tended into a reliable source of wealth. She closes, I am trying to practice the aggressive, non-judgmental about how you, me, and all of us choose to warm ourselves. Who cares if your harmless pleasure bores me to death? She closes her remarks with a short prayer. Love who holds us all, thank you for our capacity to be comforted, dazzled, and delighted by harmless pleasures and small joys. Help us to keep the faith with that 11th commandment. Thou shalt not yuck another's yum. These opening words were adapted from a longer article, Love What You Love, which appeared in the spring issue of the UU World magazine. Good morning and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Boulder's online service. I'm Fred Cole, and I'll be your worship leader this day. As Unitarian Universalists, we promise that we will stay connected to each other as we search for truth and meaning, each in our own way, and we covenant with all of life and seek to repair any disconnect, isolation, or separation as it arises, especially as we pass through this stressful period. If you are a first or second time visitor, or if you want more information about UUCB, please make yourself known to our Congregational Life Director, Beth Elliott. Her contact information is on the screen and at the top of the chat box. Were we sitting in the pews, now's the time that I would ask everyone to quiet their busy thoughts and turn off your electronics. That's not real practical. I do invite you now to enter into sacred space as we begin this time of worship together. Please keep sound muted during the service.
This is the day that has been given to us. And this is a day that we could not have created, a day we could not have earned, and one that regardless whether or not we deserve it, the day does come to us. And it comes as a gift from the universe, a gift from God, a gift from life itself. So come and let us worship with gratitude for this and so many other gifts, with humility for our shortcomings, and with hope that we will continue to transform our lives and to transform our world. And with these words, I too welcome you to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Boulder, both virtually and for the first time in several months. In actuality, in my own case, though I do regret we could not be together physically, for this, my final Sunday with you as your interim minister. I am Reverend Eric Posa, and I am glad for this chance to be together. And I invite us to join together in the spirit of worship and to join together in song. Our opening hymn is the fire of commitment. We're putting the words on the screen right now.
From the light of days remembered burns a beacon bright and clear, guiding hands and hearts and spirits into faith set free from fear. When the fire of commitment sets our mind and soul ablaze, when our hunger and our passion need to call us on our way, when we live with deep assurance of the faith that burns within, then our promise finds fulfillment and our future can begin. From the stories of our living brings a song both brave and free, calling pilgrims still to witness to the life of liberty. When the fire of commitment sets our mind and soul ablaze, when our hunger and our passion need to call us on our way, when we live with deep assurance of the faith that burns within, then our promise finds fulfillment and our future can begin. From the dreams of youthful vision comes a new prophetic voice, which demands a deeper justice built by our courageous choice. When the fire of commitment sets our mind and soul ablaze, when our hunger and our passion need to call us on our way, when we live with deep assurance of the faith that burns within, then our promise finds fulfillment and our future can begin.
If you have a candle or small chalice by your computer, we invite you to get it ready to light. And I'm actually going to ask if we can take the screen share off for just a minute so that I can share visually that we have with us,
Your real chalice.
indeed, the real chalice that we are used to from the sanctuary here as we've gathered for physical worship. I am also going to encourage those of you at home, as you prepare to light your chalices, as I light the one here, to type into your chat box where the chalice is being lit. And I'm pleased to have with us today our president-elect of our church board, Chris Zanoni, to share chalice lighting words. Chris?
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Chris Zanoni, and this morning I'm representing our Board of Trustees. Chalice lightings don't usually have a title, but if they did, today's would be Who'd Have Thunk It? This time last year, we were preparing for Reverend Kelly's last service. Reverend Eric had already visited the church and was beginning to get settled in for his service with us. The church year started normally enough. Reverend Eric met with over 40 church leaders to learn about UUCB. Shortly after that, he reported his findings and shared his observations and what would become his areas of focus. The board approved our new church mission statement. We moved forward for a while until, now imagine the sound of screeching brakes here. There was a quick succession of some big changes. Reverend Eric requested, regretfully, that the board not renew the second year of his contract because of health issues he was experiencing. He shared his news with the congregation on March 8th. By the following Sunday, COVID-19 had grabbed the news headlines. Our lives were changing drastically. Our staff moved amazingly quickly to shift us to Zooming into Sunday services, and they offered a variety of other online events to keep us all connected. The board shifted quickly to pursue finding another minister. Amazingly, within a few short weeks, we were able to find an experienced UU minister who was eager to work with us. As most of you know, Reverend Jeremy Nickel will be joining us in August to gather, for another new chapter for our congregation. All of these changes in such a short time, and the changes and the challenges continue as we see in news headlines every day. Who'd have thunk it? So here we are today to say thank you, goodbye, and best wishes to Eric before he heads to Baton Rouge with his wife, Susie. Here are some parting words shared by some of our board members. Thank you, Eric, for sharing your time and wisdom with us. You came to a church that faced many opportunities and many challenges. I greatly appreciate your willingness to help us with both. I wish you success in working with other UU churches in the future and hope you will look back on your time here with fondness. For your support of staff who really needed an advocate as the board faced tough choices. For your thoughtful suggestions to fund things that are hard to fund. For those personal moments you shared with us, coming out from the pulpit, remembering your friend, Prince Jones, and other things that showed the content of your character. For your leadership, resulting in a swift and effective transition to virtual services. For your broad experience and knowledge about how other UU churches functioned and handled various situations that we faced this year. Your insight was often helpful and widened my point of view. For the wisdom and thoughtful input you brought regarding how to consider all sides of the situation. For your commitment to us, given that you worked all year with a difficult health condition without complaint. I'm sure that couldn't have been easy for you. For your quirky sense of humor. For your interest and constitution to be an interim minister. That's a unique and courageous skill set. From what I saw, you did the best you could navigating multiple challenges, following in the footsteps of a beloved minister, navigating your own health challenges, a pandemic, and the inevitable financial challenges that go along with all that. Eric, as you pick up your walking stick again, be safe on your travels. We wish you the best of luck and an easier experience in Baton Rouge. And now to this blessed congregation, the constant throughout all of this change. I offer these words borrowed from The Spirit That Moves to remind us all of the importance of this community. What does all of this tell us about what is transient? People come and go, ministers come and go, children grow up and go off to lead their own lives. All of that is, in a sense, transient. What is permanent is the community itself, a community that endures all passages of time, a community built on liberal religious values and Unitarian Universalist principles, a community of memory and hope that links past and present and future in a continuity that transcends mere human passages. Right now, this community is in your hands. It will prosper because of your resilience. It will thrive because of your generosity. It will welcome your grandchildren's grandchildren because of your love and your commitment. I light this chalice with gratitude for Eric's service and best wishes for him and Susie in this next chapter of their lives, and with special gratitude for the gift of this blessed community. May it be so.
The chat box is now open for anyone who would like to add your own thoughts and best wishes. Your comments will be recorded and sent to Eric for his scrapbook. May the many chalice lights now shining across our community inspire us with the knowledge that even in our individual places, we are together with others in our shared hopes and faith. Now we invite everyone, wherever you may have gathered, to rise in body or in spirit as we once again join together in the spirit of fellowship and community by repeating aloud our congregation's covenant. In fellowship, truth,
Together in fellowship, truth to each other, reach out and touch one another, care with each other, to seek the truth divine. So be it.
Yes.
So be it.
So be it.
Fred, you're muted.
Fred, you're muted.
The country was beautiful. I felt great elation at the wheel as we crossed the western desert at dawn. The deep blue and purple shadowed canyons, the pale yellow morning sky with all of its color drawn out, leaving just the black silhouetted mountains behind us. With the eastern sun rising at our backs, the deep reds and browns of the plains and hills came to life. Your palms turned salty white on the wheel from the aridity. Morning woke the earth into muted color. Then came the flat light of the midday sun, and everything stood revealed as pure horizons lowering on 2 lanes of blacktop and disappearing into nothing. My favorite thing. Then the evening with the sun burning red into your eyes, dropping gold into the western mountains. It all felt like home.
And so the time had come for saying goodbye to Harry Potter. Now, I want to preface that I had planned to share this story with you weeks ago, long before we knew that there would be a controversy again about the author of the Harry Potter novels that have been so popular for so many years, for making transphobic comments again. And I offer this story today in hopes that even as we reject transphobia and other forms of oppression, and as we affirm those amongst us who are trans, genderqueer, non-binary, we find in these stories a meaning and a connection that transcends and overcomes whatever narrow-mindedness and disappointment we might experience and feel around their author. But this particular story, for those who are familiar with the books, came at the beginning of the final of the 7-book series, and it was actually filmed for the 7th movie, though left out. You can actually find the deleted scene on YouTube if you search for it. But it was the scene where Harry Potter, who had been raised as a boy wizard for so many years and attended the school Hogwarts, was finally parting ways with his aunt and uncle and cousin who had raised him since his parents had been killed when he was an infant. And it had always been a contentious relationship. For the first 11 years of his life, most of them, he was forced to live in a cupboard underneath the stairs. And it was only as he grew into his magic that he was even allowed his own room. The family that raised him never warmly welcomed him, but they did agree to raise him nonetheless. And in doing so, kept him safe from the evil wizard known as Voldemort, who was coming after him. But he was about to become officially an adult and would no longer be safe in that home. So as the Dursleys, the last name of the family that raised him, were moving out because they knew they themselves would not be safe, they said a very brief and cursory and certainly awkward and uncomfortable goodbye, at least at first. But then their son Dudley Dursley, Harry's cousin, who was about his age, came over to him. And after pausing a moment, put his hand out to shake Harry's hand and made it clear that he was going to miss Harry and that he, to quote his rejection of the negative comment that had been stated earlier, did not consider Harry a waste of space. I share this story because it's a reminder of the ways that goodbyes can be awkward, even when there's not the negative quality to the relationship. Ours has certainly been, as I've experienced it, far, far more positive than what was described between Harry and the Dursley family. But there's a couple of parallels, because for this goodbye, as I prepare to take my leave, there are going to be some consequences to parting ways, consequences that will be good for both of us. It opens the way for you for a new minister, for Reverend Jeremy Nickel, to come serve you. And I'm excited to know what he will bring, to hear from the distance what he will be bringing to the congregation. For me, it's an opportunity, sadly, one that I didn't expect I'd have to worry about, to travel to a lower elevation, which does seem to be an issue for my recently diagnosed, respiratory ailment. But also, like the Dursleys, I always understood that you were welcoming me in on a temporary basis, that my home here was never to be permanent. And even as we regret that it's ending even sooner than we initially had expected, this is the way of interim ministry. It is a way that reminds us of the transience of life that Fred spoke of in that initial reading, and that reminds us that there are times of change that can come, but it also reminds us that despite the benefits that may come with these changes, and indeed they will, there's also reluctance. There's much about being here I'll certainly miss. And I've heard so many warm and kind comments, including, I thank you, Chris, for sharing those from the board, for your chalice lighting words. But even as we acknowledge both the goodness that can come and the reluctance from parting ways, there's a reminder that leave taking, and saying farewell can open something new. And I'll say more about that in just a few minutes.
This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light shine.
Well, we share with one another in so many ways as we join together for worship. And let us take the opportunity to share in a different way as we have gathered for this virtual time of worship. Now, as you might can tell, for those who are familiar with worship in our sanctuary, I am set up with a camera on the table that normally houses the soil and the stones for which we symbolically share. But let us, in this new mode, continue our practice of sharing textually. If you have a blessing, if you have a concern, please type that word, blessing or concern, or both, in the chat box. And if you have information to share about who the blessing or concern is for, we may not have time to share too many details, but I do invite you to name them as you type blessing or concern. And in this symbolic sharing, in this virtual sharing of our symbolic stones, may we lessen the impact of our concerns, and may we amplify the impact of our blessings. Please share now. For all these blessings and all these concerns, we offer our prayerful thoughts and our support as a caring community of faith. And I invite us to join together now for a time of deeper sharing. A moment of prayer followed by a moment of silent meditation, reflection. If, as you are gathered in your own spaces, I do invite you to sit back. I invite you to let the tension fall away from your muscles, to let the cares and the concerns drift away slowly from your minds. And as you do so, may you find yourselves reaching deep within, reaching far beyond yourselves to connect with that which you know as sacred. Let us pray. Spirit of life and of love, God known by so many names and mystery and beyond all of our naming, we gather together on this day, acknowledging times of ending and feeling the losses and the changes, and to the various extent, the griefs that can come at such times. And yet, as we gather, we are reminded that we are held as a community that endures even as it transforms. may we continue in the various changes in our church, the various changes in our world, the changes in our own lives. Let us continue to hold what is enduring, even as we let go that which has reached its time for change. And in that duality, may we find a resilience to continue moving forward throughout the many changes and transitions of our own lives. So may it be for us all. Amen. Please join me for just a few seconds of silence.
Gently I go, softly I know, nothing to fear. Spirit is here, love be my guide. Lift me, I'll fly far from this place on the wings of grace. Gently I go, softly I know, nothing to fear. Spirit is here, love be my guide. Lift me, I'll fly far from this place on the wings of grace. Gently I go, softly I know, nothing to fear. Spirit is here, love be my guide. Lift me, I'll fly far from this place on the wings of grace. Gently I go, softly I know, nothing to fear. Spirit is here, love be my guide. Lift me, I'll fly far from this place on the wings of grace. Gently I go, softly I know, nothing to fear. Spirit is here, love be my guide. Lift me, I'll fly far from this place on the wings of grace.
Hey, Fred, you're muted. Sorry about that. I lost both my sound and picture. The second reading comes from one of the Berry Street Lectures, which is an annual Unitarian lecture series dating back to the year 1820. This reading comes from the 2002 lecture by the Reverend Dr. Mark Morrison Reed, entitled, "After Running Through the Thistles, the Hard Part Begins." I suggest the image of the phoenix serve us as a model of leave taking. Legend has it that when the phoenix saw death draw near, it would make a nest of sweet smelling wood and resins, which it would then expose to the full force of the sun's rays until it burnt itself to ashes in the flame. And then another phoenix would arise from the marrow of its bones. Upon seeing death draw near intentionally, and mindfulness can inform us as we put all into order. There is celebration and thanksgiving in our leave taking as we surround ourselves with sweet smelling woods and resins. In the full sunlight of truth, we explore what our years together have meant.
It is the hard part of leaving, and a reminder of what it means, not only for a ministry to come to an end, but to think about what is to come afterwards. Reverend Dr. Mark Morrison Reed has influenced quite a few of us in how we look at bringing our ministries to an end, by telling the story of a time when he and his wife, who they served as co-ministers, returned to a congregation they previously had served, as in Rochester, New York, as it happened, for a memorial service that their presence had been requested for. This is the third year after they had left, and the new minister had agreed that it felt like it had been enough time passed, that it would be fine for them to return, that it wouldn't throw things off. And so they did come back to lead that memorial service. And the instant they arrived, they felt like they had made a mistake. As Mark Morrison Reed put it, referring to his colleague Beth Banks, who was then serving the church, immediately we were the ministers and Beth was the interloper. His presence back with the congregation had shifted the dynamic with the minister who was serving them at the time. And it was based on this experience that he had, one or two other personal experiences, and those shared with him by colleagues over the years, that led him in that Berry Street lecture. This is an annual lecture and a rather prominent one for Unitarian Universalist ministers. It led him in that lecture to offer these three pieces of advice, which he considered the painful fine print about leaving a ministry. He said, "You will love your parishioners with all your heart, but never befriend them. You will pour out your lifeblood for the community, but never settle there. And you shall die to the congregation so that the ministry might live." These are hard words of advice. And there's some understandable differences of opinion about the extent to which they should apply to settled ministry. But those of us who have made a vocation of interim ministry in particular have come over the years to see the wisdom of this advice. And it's the reason why when we come to the end of our transitional ministries, we do step away a little more intentionally and a little more fully. It's not because we're glad to be leaving, it's not because we don't want to contact you. It's because we know that by our stepping away, by our leaving space and opening space, we are welcoming the opportunity for a new ministry, a new relationship between congregation and next minister to arise. Of course, this is all easier said than done, but it does explain what the commitment to this ministry of preparing the way can mean. My colleagues of various Christian denominations who practice interim ministry, I've attended ecumenical trainings with some, and have often said to me that John the Baptist has been a meaningful metaphor for them for their own ministries. Those of you who familiar with the gospel stories about him will remember that he announced himself not as the one that people were waiting for, but the one who was preparing the way for another who is to come. And that matches very closely my understanding of interim ministry as well. And it's in part the reason why the walking staff that I came in with first Sunday was a meaningful metaphor for me. It evoked that image of that eccentric, transient figure who had so much to share. But it's helpful for me to reflect on how a leave taking can be meaningful. And I found particularly these words from Lawrence Ferris, a now retired Presbyterian minister, as it happens, to be helpful. He wrote about the 10 commandments of leave taking. And I'm not going to share them all, but a couple seem particularly relevant. And he noted first that thou shalt affirm thy congregation's ministry. That one's easy for me, because there is so much about the ministry of the UU Church of Boulder that is worthy of being lifted up and affirmed. You have done so much good for so many, and particularly with your sanctuary ministry in recent years, with Ingrid and her family, and your recently renewed and renewing racial justice ministry, actions on behalf of the climate and climate action, and the many ways that you're ministering to one another, among so many others, are indeed worthy of affirming. But one of his other commandments was, thou shalt attend to thy family. And that has been an important balance for me to keep in mind as I've struggled with some health problems that have left my energy less than it needed, in my opinion, to be effectively to serve this congregation. It's also been an issue for me in my relationship with my spouse and with others that are close to me. And knowing that taking time to create space for attending even more fully and attentively to them is going to be important as well, just as we would all do for our own families. There's another of his commandments, thou shalt usually, he adds in parentheses, thou shalt usually stay away once thou hast left. And this speaks to the wisdom that Mark Morrison Reed lifted up in his Berry Street lecture. But there's one other important commandment that makes so much sense for us to remember. Thou shalt grieve. Because this is an ending. And with endings do come loss. And the experience, the emotional experience of loss, is the experience of grieving. And while it may happen on different levels for different people, it certainly happens in different ways for different people. letting yourselves have the space to grieve, letting myself have the space to grieve is important. There are so many faces that I'm going to miss, so many conversations that I have valued throughout this year that I'll regret not having the easy access to. And there's certainly going to be some things about this place that I'm going to miss. Everything from that glorious view that we saw for the last time this morning as we drove down Diagonal Highway into town, into the church, to the church, seeing the Flatirons and the rest of the foothills, the Rockies as we approach. Everything from that to the Dushanbe Tea House and so many other small and large aspects of living here that have been so good. And also, there is the good part of leaving. Because with the leave taking, with the ending, I know that there is space opening up for a new ministry to rise in this congregation, to rise like the phoenix that Mark Morrison Reed described, that can take on a new life even from what seems to be the remains of the old. And I have every confidence that even as you face some challenges this coming year, this congregation is going to find itself in this place of being able to lift up, to rise up, and to find a new way forward. And to find ever new ways to live out that mission, to connect bravely, to embody justice, to deepen spiritually, and to always love. As the beacon of liberal religion, I know you to be. And so I go today with the hopes and the confidence that you are going to find a new way forward that is going to serve you and the Boulder community so very well in times to come. So may it be for you all. Amen.
During this season of not meeting in the same physical space, we nonetheless continue our ministries, including new online ministries described on our church website and websites blog, Touchpoint. We continue to welcome donations to the offering through online giving, as well as checks mailed to the church. The link for UUCB online contributions is below. We especially welcome those who can set up monthly online payments, as our church pays no fees for recurring payments. This link is also in your online order of service and was just posted in the chat box. We also continue our support of our nonprofit community by our Share the Plate program. For the month of June, our nonprofit partner is Meals on Wheels. This from the leadership of Meals on Wheels. If clients are the heart of what we do, then volunteers are the body and soul of our operation. We have over 350 volunteers total. About 130 of them show up every week to prepare, pack, deliver, and help feed almost 300 people every day. Without the dedication of so many willing to work early hours and brave the summer construction and traffic, our operation simply would not be. Volunteers dedicate over 18,000 hours per year and drive nearly 170,000 miles. May we be as generous as we can. We'll now receive the offering. And please stay with us because we want you all to participate in special community recognition for Reverend Posa. As we continue funding our church and our nonprofit partners, we create connections, lasting relationships, and belonging, which are of benefit to our entire community. Thank you for your gifts. Chris Zanoni will now lead us in a liturgy of release. Chris?
An interim period is a time of transition, a time between what was and what is not yet. As our interim minister, Eric came to UUCB to help us prepare for our next chapter of ministry. When he arrived, he committed to being truthful and open, to listening deeply to our truths, and to learning from our insights. He promised also that when the time came, he would lead clearly and completely, that our next chapter of ministry could begin.
Friends, we have done well together. And whether or not our hearts are ready, our work together is at its end.
Eric, you have offered us moral leadership, religious insight, and spiritual guidance. You have helped us celebrate our strengths and deal with challenges and pain. We have done our best to remain in honest and open communication with you. We have tried to handle disagreements directly and with kindness, so that our shared vision, shared wisdom, could blossom into renewed vitality and vision for this congregation. We have done well together, and whether or not we are ready, our work together is at its end.
Members and friends of the Unitarian Universalist Church of Boulder, I release you from our covenanted relationship as interim minister and congregation. May the work of this phase of your interim period continue to empower your congregational life. May the strengths that you've claimed continue to shape your relationships with one another and give you energy and courage to live your values in the wider world.
And now I invite the congregation to join together in saying these words that are being put on the screen now. Reverend
Eric Posa, we release you from our covenanted relationship as the interim minister and congregation. We thank you for appreciation,
caring.
May
You continue to bring both challenge and passion to congregations in transition years.
And may you always be grounded
Surrounded by people who value your strengths, your shortcomings, appreciate your gifts.
Appreciate your gifts.
Let it be so.
If you were at UC UUCB last July for Eric's welcoming.
Fred, you just accidentally muted again.
If you were with us last July for Eric's welcoming service, you'll remember that he arrived on our chancel carrying a walking stick. He told us the story of how this walking stick has accompanied him upon his entrance into each new congregation that he has served. He then leaned it against the back wall of the chancel and said, "I will leave this here as a constant reminder to you and to myself that my time, albeit short, I am here for a purpose. That purpose being to join with this congregation and this community and prepare you for the best use of my abilities for the journey which lies ahead." Later that morning, this faith community pledged ourselves in covenant with Reverend Posa to also provide our best efforts in the furtherance of that purpose. A moment ago, we released Reverend Posa from his part in that covenant, but we have not released ourselves from that pledge. Well, it's now time for me to hand your stick back. Perhaps by changing its color, you could then begin your next adventure with a baton rouge. May the sun shine upon your face. May the road rise to meet your feet. May the wind be always at your back. Vaya con Dios, mi amigo.
Well, thank you, Fred. And thanks to all of you here at the Unitarian Church, here at the Unitarian Universalist Church, Boulder. I am so appreciative for this phase of the journey and wish you all the best going forward. And were we together physically, I would offer one final symbolic, but also very practical step of leave taking, which I'll do in a different way today. As worked out in advance with church staff, I'll be leaving the church keys in the office. And with that, let us join together for our closing hymn, It's Blue Road Home. Words are on the screen.
Standing on these mountains and plains, far away from the rolling ocean, still my pride and heart can say, I've been sailing all my life
So, as we go forth from this time and from these many places where we have gathered, and as we extinguish the flame in our chalice, may we go forth from this sacred time and these many sacred places that we make together, graced with the blessings of freedom and wholeness. For though our worship and our ministry together may now end, let the service of this beacon of liberal religion continue anew. And may we go forth and find ever new ways to serve this hurting world in the spirit of love. Fare thee well, UUCB, and go in peace.
You gotta put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. Put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. You gotta put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. Put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. You gotta put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. Put one foot in front of the other and lead with